Okay, let's start. Altogether, our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Βασίλα Κοράνια, παράκλητο πνεύμος αληθείας, ο πανταχού παρών και τα πάντα πληρών, ο θησαυρών αγαθών και ζωής χορηγός. Ελθέ και σκήνωσον ημί και καθάρισον ημάς από πάσης κυλίδος και σώσον αγαθέ τας ψυχάς ημών. Amen. Thank you, everyone. Okay, that's me. Good. All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us online. To our friends, and then all those are here tonight as well too. I know we had a little break the past couple of weeks in our adult spiritual enrichment class, but we're going to try and get back into the groove of things. We got this week. I believe we have next week. We should have the next 3 weeks, and then we'll take a couple weeks off with the Christmas holiday and obviously Theophany. And then from there, after Epiphany, we'll reconvene. And in the spring semester, that's how my brain works. The spring semester after Epiphany, in the beginning, middle of January, we're going to have a new theme since we finished these. The one in the spring one, there's been a couple requests that we've been talking about themes. So now we're going to this. So now we're going to go into a little bit more detail on maybe a couple short, slight books that we can also have via PDF. So that I'm just going to go over glance, but I'm going to encourage you guys then to just do a little reading. So what we might do is we might do like, they're not long. Some of these books, especially if they're like commentary based, for instance, like of St. John Chrysostom, they're realistically 30 pages and they're not that long. And if you've ever seen them, they are, I'm going to try and just show you because when we find them. So they're from SVS.edu. I think that's it. St. Vladimir's St. Vladimir's Seminary. They have their own press. Yeah, St. Vladimir's Seminary Press. And they are, I would define, they have surpassed our school of Greek Orthodox school of theology, especially in the translation of books, especially in commentaries and writings into English. And here's an example, like St. Gregory of Nyssa. Now it's called the Popular Patristic Series. These are, they're literally, as, I don't know, they're as big as your hand, they're like little mini books. They're literally, I don't know, 40 to 50 pages long. And there's numerous ones, and the ones that we're going to go over. So if you ever want to find any additional books, I would highly recommend looking into this one. Popular Patristic Series. Okay. And look at these wonderful titles, like On the Church. Now, these are letters from St. Cyprian of Carthage, On the Orthodox Faith from St. John of Damascus, On Wealth and Poverty, which I love. It's on by St. John Chrysostom. Down here, St. Romanos the Melodist on Hymns of Repentance. And look at all these breakdowns. St. John Chrysostom's letters to St. Olivia on Bosca from Melito of Sardis. St. Pius the Great on Christian ethics. Here we got some other ones. Give me a word, the alphabetical sayings of the Desert Fathers, which is, it's kind of like, these are all simplified because if you ever look at many writings or readings that come from, like in Greek or in ancient fathers, there are volumes, right? And they're just so intense. These are short, wonderful reads that give you the opportunity to connect and on different topics, on Christian doctrine and practice. Wider than the heavens. Look, these are 8th century homilies on the Mother of God, okay? Poems on Scripture, okay? On the Holy Spirit by St. Basil the Great. I mean, that one itself it has its own beauty. So there's on the Incarnation. This one I read at the school. And look at this one. It has an introduction by who? C.S. Lewis. If you guys know C.S. Lewis as an author, he has, I mean, there are many instances where C.S. Lewis, people want to define him as someone's like an Orthodox contemporary. Not to that level, but you hear about what he says in interdicts regarding with the faith. So this is something we're going to think about, and I'm going to put a couple of them together for us when we create our theme in the spring, just so we can talk about and read. It'll be really nice. It'll be really engaging on this aspect of our adult spiritual enrichment, okay? All right, so that's that. Now we're going to go back to our theme for tonight, okay? And I'm going to screen share so our friends online can see us too. There's my friends. Share screen. Let's go here. Oh, yeah. Okay, so the screen share. You are screen sharing. Why did that pop up? That never used to pop up. Oh, there you go. Okay, weird. Okay, so tonight, the Beatitudes, poverty and spirit, okay? Poverty and spirit. Now, let's start with this discussion because this one's always a very interesting one to talk about. What do you think when you hear this title right now? Poverty and spirit. What does that mean? What does that mean to you? I just said it to you. Hey, we're going to talk about in church poverty and spirit. What does that mean? You could say hypothetically, just reading the title, that it means in spirit I'm going to be poor or something. Poverty, poor. But what does that mean? Poverty and spirit. What do you think that means in our discussion in these attitudes? Remember this. Don't forget the Beatitudes. Even though the Beatitudes do highlight this, does anyone know what Beatitude highlights this one? Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Okay, so good. So we know that blessed are those who are poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. What do you think that means to you? Let's go poverty in spirit, poor in spirit. What do you think that meant to you? Humility. Blessed are those who are poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Humility. Okay, very good. How would you want to elaborate on that a little bit? Now remember, I always tell people, because we heard that yesterday for St. Nicholas liturgy, the gospel was when our Lord offered, now that one was Luke's or John? No, it was Luke's. It was Luke's interpretation when he was in Tyre and Sidon, and he was telling the people again a type of beatitudes, and he broke it down. Blessed are those, but this one comes from the Sermon of the Mount. Blessed are those who are poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And you say with humility, how did they get to that point where blessed are those who are poor in spirit? Or how do they understand that? For there is the kingdom of heaven.
Somebody who can't think much.
Now, naturally, on paper, you would probably assume like that, but Greg's kind of leading into a point with humility. What it's trying to say is poor in spirit, because if you're rich in spirit, what does rich in spirit mean? Ego, pride, then inapo. Because when you plusia, are you humble? It's very hard. It's very hard. We know. I know. I know I see people. I met people who are, you can define as well off, whatever. And it is very difficult for them just naturally. Think about it, to just be humble. Let's throw some examples and we'll continue into the humility aspect, because this is always a great linchpin for discussion. Look at athletes. Look at what's his name? Amazon, Bezos, right? He gives $1 billion away. And to him, it's almost in retrospect, chump change. You see how much he's worth, his net worth. So then, even if he attempts to help, well, it's almost like, yeah, but we also know who you are. That's an example. Or respectfully, this can actually relate to all of us, especially in the rich in spirit, because when is your spirit most overflowing in the calendar year? Well, okay. I would say for me, now you're not wrong. So these are all good opinions. Me, I would say my spirit or joy naturally is around this time, Thanksgiving, Christmas, where then you're like, oh, I will help people, right? I picked it upon a couple Sundays ago in one of our sermons on how we give. It's Thanksgiving, whatever I have left over, I'm going to give away. Or if it's Christmas, I'll get a gift for someone. But then that's twice out of 363 days, left over. Why isn't that a natural ethos? Why don't I consistently give? And then I looked like at St. Nicholas yesterday, so even today, St. Ambrose of Milan, all these great hierarchs, and it sounds so mythological that there was humans who they just served and gave and never asked anything in return. Now, naturally, that prototype is Christ. But we've turned Christ into mythology. Because when you think who Christ was and what he did, when you read the Bible, you're like, that's why people will tell me, especially as a Christian lifestyle, or they'll tell me, come on, Papa, do you believe this? Who could do this? And I say, I don't know, try. I don't know, Dokima said, who knows? What do I know? But the problem is we have such an attitude in our lives that I can't even think about this. So then our poor in spirit, how I resonate with it sometimes, are those who don't have belief, whether I find them to be poor in a belief. What were you going to
say? Yeah, that's what I would have thought. If you just said that word, that phrase, that's what I would have thought.
Well, it goes back to what we said before, which she was right, because when she said, well, they're not correct. So I think about it and okay, like grading system. When you're defined as poor, you never hear poor as appropriate or want to receive that. Now, naturally, as we've understood as a Christianity, the poor are always defined in that blessings. And we're going to hear it this upcoming Sunday with the great banquet. This upcoming Sunday is gonna be the parable of the great banquet. It's chapter 14 of Luke, okay? And in that one is where the one where the master has this great banquet and tells all his servants, gather all my close ones, whatever. And what do they all say to him? It's my favorite one. I'm too busy. I got this. I got a tenth of this. I got my wife who's this, all this stuff. Excuse after excuse. And he says, fine, go to the lame and everyone in the streets and whoever you can bring. And there's a couple small icons. You've seen some beautiful icons coming out of now, where they're showing the imagery of this. You see like a couple people that the banquet is empty and there's only a couple of invalids or whatever. And that's what it is. And it shows it because it goes into the attitude where then I go into the poverty of the spirit. So what is great about this statement is I think personally, how we translate this and how we describe this, I think everyone's correct. Correctly, it is about the humility that we need to have so that we can say, blessed are those who are poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Because now when you think of that part, take out, because before we just said poverty in spirit, now that I added the part 2, for theirs the kingdom of heaven, what parable relates to that exact statement? Blessed are those who are poor in spirit. Now, if you take out spirit and just keep poor, for theirs the kingdom of heaven. Close.
For the rich man and Lazarus.
Because remember, it was like flip-flop.
Oh, yeah.
Because then Lazarus goes to Abraham, that he's gnashing his teeth and in anger. That's how I think too. So when you see that attitude, you then see like, okay, because realistically, how many of us can actually really relate to the rich man? And remember, how we measure ourselves when we look at the scriptures is everything should be measuring yourself on all aspects of a parable or story that our Lord or the Old Testament brings up. So it goes up like the best story. We always, as I say, I bring this up in every sermon. Every time we talk about the prodigal son, we always talk about the prodigal son. I say, forget about him. We know his story. He actually gets the best of the deal. He gets all the inheritance, asks for forgiveness, and the father loves him back. Who's my favorite one? The one who stayed by the whole time. Because then why? He then got jealous. He got envious. Because you do all this hoopla for him, I never left you. But then the father tried to console him, comfort him. You already have everything. But he who was lost is now found, and whatever and is now saved. I think that's really important for us to really think about. Because whenever you hear a parable, you have to relate to yourself in both aspects. Same thing with the rich man and Lazarus. We can all define ourselves technically. We always go towards the rich man. But how many of us are Lazarus? Why? Now, I'm not trying to say that. See, that's the hardest part. How can us as Christians, Orthodox Christians, look internally, self-reflect, and see our downtroddenness and keep our humility instead of who was an example of, wasn't not an example of downtrodden, but of full spirit and exclaimed it, boastfully to the Pharisee, right? Because then that's the reverse. Because then we go back to our friend, the publican. He was the humble one, who he knew that he couldn't even look up to heaven because of his unworthiness. So then it goes back to us. When we think about poverty and spirit, we are called to think about, and what's going on in relation to our life. When you're really high, how do you stay humble? And when you're really low, how do you not become jealous of those higher than you? And to also see the beauty that's in your life as well too, so that you can stay on track. That's why I brought up this past Sunday when I talked about the jealousy and then the envy. My question, I always bring it up, I'm like, why do we always look outwardly? And again, the reality of that one is you could say it's self-esteem. Self-esteem and the attitude that I don't want to see what's actually really inside. Because if I do, I'm either going to be afraid, or I'm not going to like it. Okay, so if you're afraid or you're not going to like it, then the attitude then most likely is if you don't like it, then change, grow. And then we understand this. That's what Lent does for us. That's what Advent does for us. Advent, sadly, because of just how our culture is in our world, it doesn't have the charisma of Lent. I mean, Lent it's so beautifully orchestrated for, piety and humility, because, you see how it's defined. You have a clean Monday. You have services that really speak about all through the week, about forgiveness, humility. Heck, you break it up into St. Andrew's Canon. So the best one, St. Andrew's Canon of Crete for during Great Lent, it's usually chanted on the Wednesday, Thursday before Lazarus in full. Katara Evdomada, clean week after clean Monday, they break it up to every night. To do like a section of it. Altogether, it takes 4 hours. Oh, you want a vigil? That's a vigil. It's a 4 hour long service, and it's all poetry. Now, naturally, if you don't understand the Greek, you don't understand Byzantine chant, you could just be like, oh my gosh, what is this person doing? But when you actually read it, and I would almost challenge, I might say to our group, because I think this is higher, please forgive me, higher intense thinking of Christianity, just to look over those hymns, because they're very, and mind you, they're first person of this man, like David did in the Psalms. The Psalms were David opening his heart about his unworthiness, starting from glorifying God to, we know, Psalm 50 as the merciful psalm, in which he's asking, have mercy on me, O God, and your abundant mercy, and blot out my transgressions, everything. Same thing with St. Andrew of Crete. So when we get into Lent, that's why Lent has that, but it has that ethos. So in here, we have a very difficult Lent of Advent to prepare us, to keep us humble during this time of preparation, to open our hearts, to open our cave, to welcome Christ into our lives at his birth and his nativity, and to understand that. And so I find that to always be a big struggle because, we always turn to Lent. And I said, but that's not the key to that's not the only time of the year that we're going to find humility. That's where it's hard. As a human, consistent poverty of the spirit is very hard to recognize and remind ourselves so that we can find that last point. I think it goes back to what I said Sunday. When I talked about the jealousy point, the last point of everything I said is who thinks about their salvation? Who thinks about salvation? I say with respect, it's usually my elderly, because with respect, they're closer to that. Okay. My age, you talk to anyone of my constituents, right? What do we all deal with? Work, the insanity of my kids, their extracurriculars, their food, what they're going to wear, or when my son, 7 a.m. is screaming, I don't want to wear jeans. Those are my fights. Why does he wear straight pants? I'm like, oh. I mean, Presbytera is incredible. She
You're more comfortable.
I know, Presbytera, she's so incredible. She like sets up the whole week with her clothing. She's a rock star. So then it's great for me, because if I'm helping out, whatever, it's good. But man, and I'm like, it's just pants, put them on. It's like, no, it's oh my God. When am I going to find time to think about my salvation? When I got a 5-year-old screaming about sweatpants. Think about it. When can we really think about these attitudes? And I think that's the real struggle in life, is that we can't contemplate that unless I can understand how to, first of all, build that connection with God so that I can understand humility. I think that's the other thing too, because remember, humility has now been respectfully wiped away in society because of prominence, of wealth, of accolades, of awards. I mean, you see that. I mean, we have award shows for everything under the sun. And then you have, I mean, heck, we give the award shows for the worst movies. You ever hear the Razzies? I think it's pretty funny too. I mean, it's, even though it's sarcastic, it's still an award, right? Here, we'll make fun of you, so take this on top of it. But all this stuff, it exists. But where's the reality? Because myself, and I've said this in numerous discussions in Bible studies, but in numerous discussions, I think about these attitudes, especially about humility, and trying to figure out why is it so discouraged. Now you can look into the ancients. You go as far back as to any king. Heck, we know Adam and Eve and going down. What drove them into obviously their life of sin? And we know humility is a hard virtue to attain or retain if you have it. But so when you think about it to modern day, it's not even a thought, because you see people. I mean, and I always point them out. I apologize, and I've said it to you openly. I apologize when I pick on the Kardashians, but like when they pop up on my newsfeed, and it's a schizophrenic news representation. What is it? What it states. So that's what the news is. The news wants news, but then they will tear down whatever the person, however they get for the news. And I'll give an example. So the Kardashians, as they are the open family with every minor thing they do in their entire lives, right? I guess the one story I just read is the one sister and her boyfriend or whatever took 2 separate private planes that they own, hard life, to go to the same place. And yet they're mocking her because she's also the same one who talks about climate control, green planet, stuff like that. So they're ripping her apart, but they know it's just fuel to offer some type of news. So I think about that, and I struggle because they're clearly, it's impossible to show humility on their aspect. And then on our end, you don't see the news highlighting people who are humble, right? They always show it as exploitations. Even us as church, it's very tough. Think about it. What times do they ever show prominence about the church? They show prominence about the church if the church, you give money to something, some special celebration, Pascha. And I get frustrated with it because with Pascha, they just show us like walking around with the wooden structure of the Kubuklion. And it's like we're doing some show, right? It's some parade. But they don't know the purpose. They don't know the beauty, the hymns that we just sang in the church, the Ngomi all together, and understanding what we're actually really singing of the lamentations in my Lord's burial and burial shroud and tomb. So then that's again it becomes a part of that exploitation and hoopla. But then again, you'll say my goal is not to pick on the media, but that's what we always see. Then in the media, we then get into the other part about the churches, always showing the black marks. They did this, they did that. Gosh, the worst ones now, and I've said it Sunday with those forums, especially with social media. There's this one called like Orthodox Times. I mean, it's almost like the goal of these things is just to show how wrong everyone is. Look, I look because it just pops up on your feed. You slide up. To me, it leaves such a disgusting attitude because I'm like, is this what life's about? People making a post about this church and that church, and when I talk about church big, I'm talking about Constantinople, Antioch, this and that, right? And then there are all small things that are going like, look up at this priest. This priest was then embezzled with money and stuff like that. I get it. We're on a fishbowl. We have to be perfect, right? Okay. I don't wear my black robe and stuff like that, but I'm a sinner. I understand. But it's hard because then when we look at this title of poverty in spirit, who amongst us can really believe that they have a poor in spirit? Now, poor in spirit, let's retract, not from how us three brought up about being like bad or weak in spirit, but poor in spirit so they can have.
Agathosini is lack of knowledge. Probably they don't go in the net. I gave up internet anyway.
Kalitera.
But agathos to pneumati is somebody who is, how can I explain to you in English?
Say it.
Makari iftohito pneumati. That means they're not very smart, and they don't. In agathi.
Agathi means
Agathi
is like an innocence. It's a purity.
Yeah.
So it's not that they're not smart. It's the opposite. It's almost a naiveness. It's the naiveness.
Well, he used the word humility, and I think that's.
Well, that's
What is you?
Tapinosi. You're right, and tapinosi. So speaking about, but agathi goes into the attitudes of our discussion, especially about this thing, where we're talking about stotia and spirit, poor in spirit, is out of almost like the naiveness. Because
that's the word I was.
the naiveness of the person, where think about it. If you look at modern church fathers, you hear St. Paisios and all these elders and everything else, they talk about, or even now, the hesychasts. The hesychasts were ones where they live a life of isikia. Yeah, quiet. In other words, to encourage a mind of naiveness. Where you're always solely focused on prayer and you don't participate in the rebuking of that participation. In other words, a tit for tat. We now, that's what I'm saying. Sunday, I didn't say it eloquently, but Sunday, like with these new forums, you have the opportunity. If you don't like someone, God, you can if you don't like someone, you can write up an essay on social media, write to them and on the wall. And then people could see, and then now we have all these emojis, right? And you could comment, like, dislike, angry face, laughing face, everything else. What?
What happened to the forgiveness?
How can I get to forgiveness if I can't even be humble? You're at step 2. I can't even do step 1. There's no humility. So what we're trying to imply is, now let's go back to this question. Poverty in spirit, poor in spirit. Who's going to then receive the kingdom of heaven? That's the fear. So when I said Sunday, that's my focal. My focal is when I think about what I do. So even with all of you, if I were to speak to all of you, and I'm preaching to all of you, and I lead you wrong, that is on me. So then that's the burden on, okay, that's just a priest. But as a human, if you do something wrong to someone, and if you do and you don't ask for forgiveness, okay, because you have to humble yourself. There is no way, I think it's impossible. Now you're gonna say what's impossible? Impossible God. I think it's possible to forgive without having humility. You can't. You have to have humility to be able to forgive. Think about it. Because why? Even if you're right, they even tell us, even if you're right, you're supposed to forgive them and try to reconcile. But what does Christ say? And he says, he even broke it down. Remember ever see when he says it? If you don't bring them to the church, right, and try to reconcile, if they won't hear you there, bring 2 or 3, witnesses or brethren to be with you. And if then they won't reconcile, then leave them and go about your day, right? Okay, so that shows an example. But think about that. Even if you are right, you're called to reconciliation. That's the problem. No, we are at a cutthroat level of life now. I'm right, you're wrong. And I tell everyone, that's my favorite when I have conversation. I have friends, I see all these different things. I tell someone on the side, I'm like, okay, good job. What'd you gain? So you won an argument. You want me to give you a crown? Pat you on the back. Oh, you're great. You're all set. I look at, and does that make you, what does that make you? That's the other problem too. We've now gone so disoriented about who we are as a human. What is a great human? Can someone tell me? What do you think is a great human?
Humble.
Okay, so we're talking about now from the correct standpoint.
And
But hold on.
clear,
Okay,
clear.
that's from your end. Go back though. Let's go to reality. That's not realistic. That's appropriate. That's not realistic.
That's my life.
I know, Frost, I put you in your own category 1,000 times now. We know. Stop it. Realistic. Listen, realistic. It's because I love her. I know it. But she's right though. Realistic though. If I put great, who did you assume was great? Remember, think of like when you say JFK. He just has an aura, right? You think about JFK. People loved him. You looked at athletes. You looked at actors. Gosh, as a kid growing up, you're gonna see. Now you think I'm young, but I used to love. You know, I used to love the most. Was my favorite actor was Charlton Heston. Oh, I thought he was the coolest thing. But especially from like Ben-Hur to 10 Commandments on. I'm like, I still to this day, if I were to ask my dad to paint an icon of Saint Moses, I would say I want him to look like that. He's got to look like.
Because it
He
reminds.
reminds, and that's connected the most.
Yes.
So, but all of them. But you know, when I look at, I thought he was an honorable man. I thought, wow, that'd be someone I'd like to imitate. That's how most people work.
Because in support of guns.
Okay, now you're getting into. But think about that
I
though.
know, I feel the same way.
Same attitude. So we have the same thing. Look at us like with heroes. We thought of, you see of FDR, you see of Eisenhower, you see true presidents, right? Presidents, they automatically get to that level. But then I think now modern day, forget Trump and all these things, but you saw those, it's got a disillusioned taste into your mouth. And that's not only presidency, but now you even seen the attitude of politics. All the previous politicians, they had an aura about them, right? To be elected, you represent me. Look at this. This is who I want. But now we see, because then the problem that I see now is, so who do we look up to? And the problem that I have with that definition of who we look up to is, I don't know what to emulate that then in turn will allow me. What's the whole point of emulating someone if you don't make the future a better place through that emulation, that mimicking of that person? Because that's what remember, that's what athletes do. Athletes, they look up to, like, okay, hypothetical, Michael Jordan, but then not only do they look up to him, they want to be better than him, which is very, very difficult. But that is like, oh, he's the greatest and stuff like that. And they strive. That's a strive for. The problem that we have as people, and I'm not even putting Orthodox Christianity as humanity, is we don't know how to strive to be better. Because if we strove to be better as humans, we would then figure out ways, instead of killing each other, harming each other, and all these things. And
Jealousy.
forget jealousy. I look at the attitude, like someone posted a picture. I was reading this article before. I was waiting to pick up my son at school at 3:00. There was an article on it was the San Francisco Times, and it pops up on my thing. And it said this December there will be many. It says, like the title says, there'll be many bodies in the city of San Francisco. And I thought maybe they meant from the cold weather. No, it meant from the opioid crisis, because there are people that are literally taking opioids and stuff too in the middle of the streets. Not just in this exists everywhere.
That's right here.
Yeah, and are just dying of ODs left and right, overdoses. And you think about that? I do. I just sit back, because I think of how I live just as a human, how I breathe, how I act, how I eat, my children and stuff like that. And to see the level that someone might degrade themselves to these sufferings, and I get it. The addictions, the pains, whatever, my Lord, it hurts to just think. Then visually, what are people gonna do? When you walk and you actually see just dead bodies? I mean, that existed, especially you'd always think, especially in war times. That's why you never heard many soldiers talk about like, I can't, it's something I saw, I witnessed, whatever, okay, you leave it be. But now, this isn't war, this is gluttony. This is life of what I can have whatever I want. Realistically, we can't. This is life. This is culture. This is humanity. That I've degraded myself as a human. Okay, my soul and everything else. I'm not even talking about Christian, because this is anyone. This encompasses Muslims, Jews, you name it, whatever the case may be. It's such a sad state. So when we think of poverty, whenever we think of poverty, we think of it as like a fine line. Poverty is a line that's subversive in us. You don't want to be there, right? Poverty's poor. And if you're in that level, you're in a really bad state. But the problem is none of us think about the poverty of our spirit, of our soul, to see where I'm really at. Because if I actually look into that avenue, man, that is so dark, or that light, and I think of it like a little like heartbeat, it's so weak that you sometimes ask, does it even exist? And
Father,
yes.
hi, it's Tina. How are you?
Hi, Tina. Great to hear from you.
Good, thanks. Sorry to interject.
Oh, perfect. I'm glad you did.
On your point, I guess I tend to think that we need to be a little bit more optimistic about the world and how people are, and that it's not absent in terms of people's struggle towards humility. Because a lot of those things, I believe, at least in my case, can be invisible to the outside world. We often see where people fail, where people make mistakes, and we don't necessarily see the reconciliation within them or with others. And so it's easy to maybe think of it more negatively than it is. And also that we're all progressing at different timelines. Some of us are ahead of the other, then we fall again, and the other person is ahead of us. And so we tend to see more of the negative repercussions. So I guess I'd like to be more optimistic about the status of our world and people.
So thanks, Tina. Very good. So on my end too, I do want to apologize. And to your point, Tina, my goal, and I apologize, wasn't trying to paint that the world is abysmal. It's that. No, you're right. I guess, and you know what? It's funny you say that. And I am a very cheerful, opportunistic, optimistic, hopeful, prayerful person. It's when you hear these things and see them, you then ask yourself, I will sound like, Nathaniel, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Is there anything good really there? Well, come and see. I guess we have to come and see. And I think that's a great point, because when we only speak in the negative, or we only highlight that, then you really ask the question, is there any beauty? Is there any hope? And then that's where now, going back to what you said, Tina, I really commend you on that point. It goes back to our attitude of us being Christians. Because if you are a Christian, you have to live on the attitude all of your life of hope. Whatever the difficult situation, you have to turn to hope. Because then hope turns to faith, faith turns to light, and to belief, and to participation and moving throughout your life. But the problem is, we see these situations not arise. And so then we have to think about how do we find that simplicity in life? Now I go back to the poverty of our definition. Thanks, Tina, for that statement, that poverty in spirit, and to also turn it into, instead of only from humility, going back to our point of being poor, being simple. Think of the simple life. How was the quote unquote simple life of a person? You hear that first of the monastics. The monastics take on this mantle very much, because they leave of this busy world, and they respectfully go into a simple life of prayer, of fasting, and of dedication, where realistically their great temptations are predominantly driven from their lifestyle of obedience, humility, forgiveness, and of simplicity. But for us, that's very foreign, general human beings, right? Because it's very busy, you're very consumed. And And that's where you gotta turn to the aspect of like, okay, because my whole point going back to what Tina said is not to just make this to a half hour of, all right, well, according to what Father says, there's no hope, we're in big trouble. Now, how do you turn it to the positive? How do we turn it to being humble? And what I find, from my point of view, and we've seen it in the scriptures in every instance, is that we have to be able to start by beginning with the realization that I can always change and grow. But I think that's something as a human we don't contemplate often. Because even if as an elderly person, as in anyone in any age or whatever it might be, we're at a level and that's that. We might be plateaued, we're fine. Technically to your dying breath, you should always be having an attitude of, first of all, praising God. Secondly, asking God to be merciful to us, right? That's why you even hear me in all my prayers, like, may God have mercy upon me, the sinner, of those who lost, because in any moment, whether I am in a good state or in a bad state, I'm always turning to God. And so when we have this attitude, it's because I'm trying to be mindful that there's no seal, stamp, and final period that says you are set, good to go. And that's the hardest part, because when you talk with people, especially when they're at the moment of close to death, and I've met obviously numerous people in that manner, there's nothing I can say to them to say, you're fine, don't worry about it. Because the comfort that they're trying to receive is something that they can only understand. Our prayer as the living is to offer our personal comfort by hugging, loving, being there, listening, and stuff like that. And that's an example too of not only humility, which we offered before, not only of simplicity, but selflessness. Poverty of spirit also comes into the attitude of selflessness. And that's something as well too that many of us don't think about. Because if you are selfless, you're just serving and ministering and thinking of others. But we've said it, I just highlighted before in my own point, that I'm most joyous and eager to help or give. Now, the holiday season, we got to give and help. And it's this something like, if you actually really think about it, this might be the most irrelevant time to help. And it's probably the most important time to help someone that's probably the biggest struggle, probably January to March. Those are usually the darkest times in most people's lives because there's not much going on. The weather's crummy, whether you're up here. We don't get much sun. And I'm honest, physically, when like today, there was no sun, you're like, it's like sluggish. You just kind of go with the flow. But if there's sun, well, it might be -5. At least it's
nice.
at least it's bright outside. But it's true though, because I go to Florida when we were down there for our vacation. Even might have been the morning. It was like chilly time, 55, 60. I'm in shorts. I'm like, good to see you, Mr. Sun. Life's great. You know what I mean? It's that type of attitude, because if you can build that, and Christ gives us this opportunity, but it's hard. It's hard because as I talk to people, and I brought it up in previous situations when I talk about confession, you have to see yourself and your soul, your heart and your mind as a typical car engine. Again, if we don't maintain, you don't take care of it, you don't attend to it, what happens to them? They build up, they show gunk, and then it doesn't function the way it's supposed to function. And then from there, it stalls and you're out of luck. Happens to us. So the greater question to us is how of yourselves, when do you guys find the opportunity to live in those themes of simplicity, selflessness, and humility? What gives you the best opportunity? Because I know it doesn't happen all the time. I know I'm not that always. But when do you guys get the most of that, or can get the most of it? What allows you to? What strengthens you when you are there, or builds you towards that avenue in your lives?
The hope that I will get help from God on a daily basis. Because sometimes I don't know if I will be able to solve all what I have for today. I had a lot of meetings today. But in the end, when I do my night prayer, I have to thank God because He helped me to go through. And I have that peace. Even when I was scammed and I came to church and you blessed me and then you talked to me, I forgave them. What good it is not to forgive them.
Right.
Okay, they were crooks, I don't care. I forgave them. And let's move on. But the prayer is very strong with me.
That's good. That's a good example. What are yourself? When do you feel,
I would say, well, I mean, one, when I go to church, but I would say when I encounter a problem that is too big for me.
oh,
I'm
That's a good
a
one.
programmer. I mean, part of my job is
to solve?
just to be confident,
Yeah,
to solve, you have to
Yeah.
be confident.
yeah,
And that's a form of, the opposite of humility,
yeah,
but sometimes every now and then you encounter a problem that's just bigger than you.
yeah.
And that type of thing, sometimes, you realize, there's much more there than what you can comprehend.
Well, I love, that was an excellent one, because when you look, let's go back to the aspect of confidence and accomplishing something. It's the same like a leadership role, right? A leader, a leader that people look up to will be the same leader who, he might be able to take charge and lead, but can also find the balance that if he doesn't have the answer, he can humble himself enough to ask or find the support and help so that we can all progress and grow. That's why, naturally, I think all of us will admit that, okay, you never could find faults, but I think everyone almost in the United States always looks up to like Abraham Lincoln. Think about what he went through and how he went through it. We all were mesmerized by his attitude, but you saw his attitude. He had the necessity of his leadership qualities, but then he also had the humility that he needed to do to understand on how to get this done or to get it done. Mind you, during our country's most deadly war amongst each other, where so many people died. How many brothers shed their blood and stuff like that for this understanding of freedom. My gosh, not even land, just simple freedom. There's a lot. I know we know there's more details and stuff too, but that's why everyone's always looks up to him. And you think about what he did, how he persevered, stuff like that. But we have this in the aspect of our faith. We have this in the saints. We have this in Christ. I guess the greater question, just like we see that is, and I try to embody that in my own personal ministry. I look at Christ, and the one thing that I always remember what Christ says is that the master is not greater than the servant, and the servant is not greater than the master. And that to me always strikes home for me, because when I think about that, then that's why we're called to Christ as servant leaders. A servant leader is someone who walks with his people. It's like a co-worker, co-minister, co-pastor. You do work too. I think that's what we forget. When you're in church and you're praying and you're worshiping and participating, you are a part of it. You're not there. Pointless. Autocracies tonight, very beautiful. We have all these people that came, new faces. When they're there, you're with me. And if anything, you're leading me, because I could be the one that's like, oh, it goes back to Frosso. I might have had a tough day. And if I don't have the pizzazz or the strength or whatever, but then I hear the people, I'm like, wow, they're giving me that oomph. So if anything, they're leading me. So when we think of that attitude of servant leadership, I always try to tell people for ourselves as well too, and showing to the attitude of hope that anyone can do this. Anyone can find poverty, peace, poorness of spirit, so that we can truly humble ourselves. Because when we humble ourselves, as I said before, I think I've understand and reading from church fathers and spirituality that humility, respectfully, with repentance, opens the gate of heaven. That's what attains us when it says that those will receive the kingdom of heaven. When we have that though, now here's the thing though, no one has it all the time. That's okay to understand that it's okay you're going to fall. It's okay you're going to struggle. My challenge to everyone, as I challenge myself, is: are you going to recognize it? Are you going to recognize your fall? Then when you've fallen, are you going to ask to put your hand out to say, I need help, or I understand where I'm at. I want to ask for forgiveness, or be strong and repent from what I did in my life and forgive others. All of that stuff comes into play. That's heavy though. That's heavy for a human to do. And here's the best part of it. You have to do it throughout your entire life. Now, naturally, you could say I'll do it on my deathbed, but I don't think it just works that way. But you know what I mean? Everyone always, I have many people who chuckle about it, thinking about Constantine the Great, that because he was baptized, just weeks before, times before his death, that, oh, okay, he recounted, but you see what he did and his life, and yes, it's very hard. It's very hard, because then you get people who question his holiness, his saintliness. Not actually,
Megas Constantinos.
yeah, because of his life and being an emperor. I said, if this is how we're going to reflect everything, then I want you to take every person, anyone who's been canonized, both any faith or whatever, and dissect it. And then you tell me at the very end who deserves to be a saint. I mean, I'm not implying that one's more perfect or whatever, but it goes to the attitudes, because then if you look at Constantine and Helen, that example, when they were remember, they're given pretty high titles though. They're called Isapostoli, equal to the apostles, and God crowned rulers. Oh, first of all, God, Where- yeah, that's why they have I mean, God crowned rulers, okay? And that's tough because first of all, we always say you don't call it, first of all, Christ says that you don't call anyone father other than God, okay? Same thing with rulers. But then you hear the other points later on, where he says, who render to Caesar what is Caesar and what's the God, what is the God. But when you got to put that in perception. What did Constantine and Helen do is when they freed
She did it.
liberated Christianity to practice, okay, not to make it a little bit later started becoming the actual thing of Byzantium, right, of what he was creating, but to be, free from the persecution, that alone brought into an attitude so that they could serve and to explode. But then obviously when it became the actual faith of the empire, okay, well then you saw the fire that then blasted from there. But then you look into that, if that was not done, you never had these councils. He initiated it. And all these things that we had, the formation of our modern day church. That's where okay, because if not, I really look, you got to study hard because there's not much historical real details, especially liturgical from the first few centuries. We understand most of it, but it was very Hebrew still based because obviously they were Hebrews, right? Judeo-Christians. And then how they enhanced it obviously into the aspect of the communion, how they're performing these liturgies as we understand them, and what they then translated those into. And mind you, during the 200 and 300s, wherever they were located, especially under the Roman Byzantine Empire, and you hear these names of Diocletian and this and that, they couldn't even do any of these. So Fadasu, think about how they were able to get to that point, and then obviously the openness that attained from obviously Constantine's edict and Helen's example into those matters. So that's where it gets into those details, but that just goes a tangent. What are you gonna say?
The whole thing of adopting Christianity for an emperor is a huge act of courage.
Oh, yeah.
And, but here's the thing about humbleness of Constantine. When he wanted to battle Melvin Hill, they built a pillar in Rome.
In honor of him?
In honor of him, and at the top was a statue of Apollo.
Oh,
When he went to Constantinople, he had that pillar taken down
Byzantium.
and re-erected in Byzantium, except he put his own statue up.
see?
This is not a humble man.
Father,
Well,
Father,
Yes, yes.
it brings to mind what you were talking about earlier, because I think whether it's the saints or whether it's the person that we're interacting with, on a moment to moment basis, if we have a argument, disagreement with someone, we feel we're right, they're wrong, what have you, whether it's a saint or those folks. I think my struggle is that we always have to think of the good in that person first, whether it be the saint and whether or not there might be blemishes in their life, just like there is in everybody's life, or whether it be that person, like I said, that I'm talking with on a day-to-day basis that I may disagree with. And I feel I'm right and they're wrong, but I have to remember the good in them. Huh?
Tina was laughing because I said she was talking about Greg. Disagree.
No,
No, I'm just kidding. No, it was just a joke.
But just generally that I think for me, the struggle is to always step back and to think of the good in that person so that it puts me in my place a little bit, so that I can pause and perhaps remember that I'm not right necessarily, or even if I am, they have their aspects as well, and I can ask forgiveness or do what I can do to mend those fences or have a appropriate view of that person in my life. So again, I see it all connected, right? Whether it be our wonderful saints or whether it be people that we're interacting with every day.
Tina, where did you in your life, where did you get the ethos and the example to naturally begin by seeing the good in people first?
Well, I mean, that's what we're taught through Christ, right? So I don't know, it's just what we're taught, and it's our conscience,
Yeah,
I believe, that talks to us, that nags at us, and sometimes we want to suppress that because our ego fights with our conscience.
Mm,
At least mine does. I can't speak for anyone else, and it's a struggle
yeah,
between those two. So I think that's inherently within all of us, and that we're taught that, and that we are called to, work through that struggle every moment of our lives. And sometimes we're successful. And again, I speak for myself only, can be successful, and other times we fail, and then we fail, and it takes us a moment to recount that and reconcile that, right?
excellent. That's a good one. Thank you. It's, I think Tina's point is very valid because, it goes back to the very beginning. It goes back to our conversation. We said, who do we emulate? Myself, these are all inherent conditioned meanings and attitudes that are brought into our lives respectfully. And I'm not speaking against Tina. Tina's right. I think most of these times usually come, especially from the condition of your family, or how you are trained and raised up, right? You even hear it for like the book of Proverbs in the Old Testament. It's like, train up a child and it will learn to know how to walk and grow in the Lord. And we're called to do that. But the problem is, who does that and how do they do it? Because listen, if you're Greek based, okay, you have any Greek in you, you are inherently against anyone who is of Turkish descent.
Of course.
Naturally, see, without a breath. Okay, you don't like them, you despise them. I laugh now. Again, it goes back to the social media aspect, where I have friends who will post like, it's very comical. Like you'll have someone like post on social media like they're from Turkey, they did a 23andMe and said they have like Greek background. Like, oh my God, how's this possible? Like, what do you do? Kill yourself? We see, like, think of these attitudes, but that's how we think. Sadly, much of this also existed, even the animosity of the foreign attitude of here in America, but not only here, anywhere, especially in 200-300 years ago, especially with the exploration of whites and Africans, or even whites and indigenous people, because they're not like me. I don't know them, so thus they must be my enemy, or I don't recognize them. Think about that. And so that attitude, sadly, is because of how we also have it inherently. And I go back to the point where when I think about these things, that's why I would challenge everyone, is that when we go about and do our stuff, think about, now you're gonna say we're all much older, but how do you encourage these generations now, the young ones, my generation, even the ones that are having kids and stuff too, about how they can think about the lasting impact that their actions make, not only on their family, but those around them. Because then, when I talk about every Sunday, our goal realistically as Christians is to make the world a better place. And you simply make the world a better place, living a Christ-like life and expressing that into the world. I could finish like that every Sunday. Every theme, every discussion, that's what it's supposed to finish like. But that's actually what we're called to do. It's harder than it is to do. So the question is, how do we overcome that struggle? And again, these are all these tenets that we've just talked about, themes, are of the tenets, foundation of an Orthodox Christian. You're supposed to struggle. You're supposed to be humble. You're supposed to be selfless. You're supposed to give and to refrain. You're called to pray. You're called to worship. You're called to repentance. You're called to forgiveness. Okay. You've just gone through all these tenets. That's what we're called to do. Unceasingly, continuously. How many of actually of us do us? I don't know. How many do it? God bless them. How do I put that into my mind? Think about it, like, okay, got it, Father Chris, and just try to do it in my own day-to-day life. That's the real struggle. Because why? We then have to go back to our theme, as we said, and finish up to that topic and ask, what do I want to retain? What do I want to attain? Because everything you do in life now, we understand it. Like it is very simple. I perform a job to receive a pay. If I do well in my job, I receive a bonus or kudos that then will advance me. So the question is, why don't we think about like this as a Christian? Because if I serve and help people, I understand what this is going to give me and entail. But the problem is, I will receive that because that's how I am as a human until I close my eyes. But then that's why you look at people who are humble now or have very little, and you see them. I always tell people, I'm most jealous of are the people who have little and are satisfied. That's what I'm very jealous of in life. Are those who have little, you can say little. You can say, Father, who defines little? It could be anything. It could be wealth, home, car, any of those things. Because I always laugh at the joke that used to exist: more money, more problems. I believe that's true, actually. I really do. More money, more problems, more headaches. But think about those who have little, and it's less. And then, as I said before, I don't know if I told it to this body, but I've said openly in other discussions. Monastics are actually in all of us, those in the world who can't stay strong, especially in their prayer, and attempt to have a Christian spiritual life. Why? They technically, quote unquote, have it easier to build a spiritual life because they've literally disconnected themselves from this world to focus on that. We are of this world and we're trying to focus on it. So it's like, think of it as like the tether system that it's holding you back and you're just trying to go. Or like you see Christ, like, I want to try to grasp him and get him. The greater question that goes back to what I said before, the struggle. Who is going to go against the struggle and try and do the best they can? That's what we're called to do. And that's true poverty of spirit. Poverty of spirit, poorness in spirit, as we said, it is everything we talked about tonight. It's about humility. It's about selflessness. It's about repentance. It's about prayer. It's about forgiveness. It's about fasting. And it's also about turning ourselves into a selfless attitude of service and of love. When we can see that, because why? All this embodiment, who performed it to the perfect level? Christ. He did it. He fasted. He showed us that prototype. He served. He ministered. He loved. He apologized on our own sins. What do you say? Forgive them, Lord, for they, Father, for they don't know what they're doing. My God. That we're killing him and he's doing that for us. Think about that. He shed his blood for us in all these instances, but that's because he gave us what he did. And we know, you think about it into this echelon, my God, no one can compare. But then we can't also be into that level where we can find ourselves so unworthy that I can't even turn to him. We must be like the publican and understand that I can't raise my eyes up to heaven because I'm unworthy, but then I should still be able in my own humility to be able to walk up to that top of where it was figuratively in the church and the temple and say, Lord, have mercy on me, a sinner. God, forgive me, a sinner. Because that's what our Lord asks. Because why? I always say this. This is the one thing anyone tells me, if God wants one thing from you, it is the easiest answer I give everyone. It's in the Psalms. It's in Psalm 50 for repentance and forgiveness. God asks and requests of us a clean and contrite heart. A clean and contrite heart. That's all he wants. You give him your heart. Give him you. Why? Because if you are, first of all, you're giving yourself and you're doing it to whatever you have to offer. That's why I said, I am jealous and envious of people who have little and are satisfied. And they're like, you know what? I make my day. I do what I got to do. Because all of us, we always try and race and like, I need more, I can do more, blah, 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 this and that, and stuff like that. But as we go back to our theme, blessed are those who are poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And that's what we have to think about. So then, whatever we can do to humble our spirit so that we can receive the kingdom of heaven, we should do in those aspects that our Lord, his holy mother, the Theotokos, who embodied it so much with obedience and prayer and love, and all the saints exemplified, so that all of us can in turn try to receive those grace and blessings as well too. So
it seems like in today's society, that the way it's structured, it goes directly against that grain. Everywhere you look, see food advertisements, clothes advertising, cars, money, glamour. Yeah, it's always nonstop.
there's no, and I told people this. I said, well, put the example like a gambler. There's no gambler who's naturally satisfied. Think about it, they can always just want more. But that's all of us. All of us, when you get something, you want more. I mean, the only time you can say you're full is like when you eat something and you're literally about to puke from overeating. And that's forcing. But think about all these other things in life. I tell people, clothes, there's no time. Well, with all due respect to my women. There's no time you can speak to a woman, they're like, oh, you know what? I got the perfect amount of shoes. God bless you. Let's just close the Amazon account. Tina, Irene, Michelle. I'm not trying to rip on you. I love all of you. I'm just saying. God
Father, you're
bless.
calling out the wrong one. You got to put your finger to Greg on this one.
I just kidding. All these things and to say like, oh, I'm satisfied. I got what I need. I don't need any more shoes. Because on what? The next season comes, the next fashion comes, or like me. But I laugh. I tease my wife because now that's in fashion, especially for women, is high-waisted pants, high-waisted jeans. Those is, I feel like it's like the eighties. It looks like the 80s, yeah. Or I bet I'm like, oh
That's
my
good.
God. But and it's like I still have some. She's like, and I laugh about it because that's what exists. That's what exists. And Michelle says, hey, it's really funny, but it's a true attitude because you see that's goes not to the media, but to what media, because that's what presents to us. That's what our visual optics see. I mean, you see it on social media.
Your phone does it for you.
Yeah.
Your phone and bam,
Oh, yeah.
there's something there waiting for you. It's like,
Yeah.
Well, now I think. Well, time out. You know what's the best with the phone? You lucked out, but you know what's the best with the my wife says she's listening on YouTube. You know what's the best with this one is that it has metrics to know if you've looked up on a site. Oh, it's excellent. My gosh. You'll go on Amazon, and if you go on Facebook,
What is
what a
Amazon?
coincidence. Amazon, it's like a big marketplace. You go on Facebook, go, what a coincidence. You look at shoes, oh, there's another store for shoes.
Yeah, or you'll get an email.
Yeah, or you get an email, or then I'm like, how did they get my email? Well, if you get this discount, you get that 50%, just, it adds up, but again, it goes back to the attitude. Yes, and inherently it's society, but again, so then you can always put, when we put these things, it goes back to then to Christ, where then we even, I look at that gospel we read and with Christ is when it was that you read it for the great martyrs that were, well, I guess soldiers. I know you read it for Saint Demetrius, you read it for Saint George, Saint Artemios, so they're soldiers. It's the one where it says Saint Panteleimon, I think it's the great martyrs, that you will be thrown out of the synagogues and you are not one of them. In other words, especially if they revile and persecute you falsely for my name's sake. And then they will also think that when they kill you, that they are doing good to the Lord. So that's where it shows, because if you go against society, you're a freak, you're abnormal, what's wrong with you? That's why the Amish, look at the Amish, right? We comically talk about them, but they're in their bubble, they do their thing. But even now, you hear slow instances of additional technology infiltrating. They have lights, stuff like that, minor things like, whoa, something to watch. Before you know it, like again, it's like a disease, it just takes over, and before you know it takes over, because it has. And the only ones that you ever hear that it hasn't affected are those who are obviously disconnected. Or then like you'll hear I read this stuff, and I love when I read these abnormal stories of like they finding new indigenous tribes in the middle of like the Amazon where they can't get into because it's all forest, and then they'll meet them and you just see them, they're still, they're wearing like barely minimal coverings, whatever. They don't know like what is these people that are looking at them, but that's how they are. Come on. Oh, now here's the thing
I don't know,
though.
maybe they have traffic lights.
It's changed. I mean, look at Mount Athos now that they can even offer live streaming of their services in the cathedral something. Oh yeah. Oh, I mean, you can communicate with monks now. I mean, but here's the thing though, and I think that they admit there's a real struggle. I'll tell you why. Because like for instance, like Yeroda Frem from the monastery of Vatopedi, he does many what are they called? Not Zoom sessions, like presentations, okay, where anyone from around the world can get on and they can hear what webinars, bravo, webinars, and they'll have someone translate because you're gonna have Romanian, English, and he obviously speaks only Greek, and they'll ask questions, and it's like they're trying to do this stuff, but it's wild. You get thousands of people who go on these webinars, normal time of the day, at 10 o'clock in the morning, stuff like that, and they're asking for this, but we never had, this never was even a concept, but it's got to be very tough because now it's like I see this like a proverbial like hook where they're trying to leave this world, and it's like oh, come on, just give us a little piece. Not of Mount Athos, but of them. Because now that we associate them being with the Mount Athos, they actually have a higher spirituality, I don't know, more holiness. I mean, that is defined as the garden of the Theotokos, right? Peribolitis Theotoko. That's her peninsula. You hear these stories of these monasteries, these icons. My God, the relics alone that they have. I mean, Chrysostom's head with his ear, to have Saint Mary Magdalene's right hand. I mean, these things, and I've been twice, And I will not, I mean, when I've seen what I saw, and I mean, it's obviously all the men that can go, but when you go to see these relics, the Zoni of the Theotokos, literally the only piece that she left us, even of Christ, because even the Shroud of Turin, we can't determine, but to actually have a piece of the cloth of Theotokos, I mean, it's profound. I mean, you hear of the, you saints, relics, cloths, Basil the Great, you name it, like, oh my gosh. Now, naturally, they attained all this stuff, obviously from all the pillaging that was going on, obviously in the,
And no wars there.
well, that's not true,
Independent.
and that's incorrect. Oh, yeah, they're independent, but there are many times that conquests, destructions, and pillages try to happen on Mount Athos. Oh, there's one feast day where we remember the 500 monks who were slaughtered by Ottoman Turks and other things that tried
I
to,
would say the Turks.
you name it. It exists, but my friends, it's just surreal when you think about what is being done into society and is exploited into our minds, into our lives. Like that's all, I mean, it is, it's, I mean, think about it, you can do that with food. Food now, I mean, my gosh, I think you would think fasting would be the easiest thing to do now. Why? I could go on Grubhub and order any type of fasting food I want, right? I could be at home, now it's actually worse, actually the greater temptation. I can go on now and I'll be like, oh, look, got a prime rib special. 2 sides too, come on, Jim, let's roll. Medium rare, call it a day, put a little horseradish, stuff like that. What am I gonna do? But that's reality. That's where I'm attached to. Then I'm talking about this one. What has this also done with us, both with technology and everything else? Now, this is, I'm living in this world, yet my spouse is right there. My child is near me. And then they are on their devices. Is this humanity? Is this connectivity? If anything, it's that word where when I don't know if we're brought up in this group, but where like what Facebook is trying to create what's been called the metaverse. The metaverse is like it is a virtual reality world. And again, I brought it up. There's this movie. It's more modern, maybe the last 10 years. It's called Ready Player One, and it's from I think it's from Steven Spielberg. And it's actually a childish movie. It's about a child who lives in a video game virtual reality world, and if he can get like the impossible puzzle, that he's going to become like a millionaire. But his outside world, which is like modern day outside Cleveland, Ohio, is like a junkyard. It looks like those movies that you see from like Tron and stuff too, and all those old school ones. But in reality, it's actually a modern day issue. We all would rather live in this virtual reality and make up our own world and lives instead of realizing, hey, let me take this blinder off. Whoa, where am I right now? World, reality. That's what's also now becoming of humanity. And you see that because all of us, I mean, you chuckle, you see people at sporting events, they're on this. Something's going on over there. Oh, okay. Oh, wait, hold on. Oh, watching a video, I've seen it. Okay. Texting, blah, 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 stuff like that. Like, so what are you doing? Now that's why then church, there's a big line. People say, I struggle with it. I've not said it openly, but like, so for instance, and I've seen a few people, Louis, you might do it as well too. I do it sometimes. I'll go on my phone to go into a service, or I have people that send me an email with names, and I'll have my phone, stuff like that too. I can easily get distracted like that, where a banner will come down. Someone said this, or someone can send me a funny text while I'm doing a very, humbling service. Come on, you know what I mean? Like, so that's a very difficult line as well.
Outside of your congregation during services.
Oh, I know. I mean, I get it. That's everywhere though. I mean,
Yeah.
but what do you do? I mean, again, it's almost their own type of addiction.
Sure.
Very hard. It's very hard for us to disconnect because then why? Think about what vacation's about. My wife, I give Presbyterian credit. She's like, hey, put the phone away, or hey, let's be together, focus on us, and I'm like, that's okay. And it was good because I'm seeing my kids, I'm actually relating with them. I'm telling them not to be on their electronics. I'm very sensitive about my kids being on electronics. Why? Because I see the bad that it does to me. And then I see them when they're on electronics for a long time. My gosh. Actually taking it away from my middle one. Oh, if it's short, not bad. If he's been there for like an hour, it's like it sounds terrible. Please forgive my frankness, but it's like taking something like a drug addict. Scream. Like his life is lived. It depends. We try minimally. We at the
My
table.
daughter
I know.
doesn't
At the table we don't. One time, we were like, when I was with a few family members, we had it for a little bit, not at a restaurant, maybe like in someone's house right to the side, they eat, then they go. But very minimally, we try to do it very minimally, but you see the like connection to it, and like it's their life. The problem is that's a kid. Nice.
Well, the thing is, I remember there was a school like a few weeks ago where the whole school said students and faculty cannot have electronics in the class.
Wow,
It was national news.
wow.
You know, it was national news.
They have a calculator.
I was shocked because, so I'm of the age where, okay, so I graduated early 2000s from high school. I know I'm young. And there was no, cell phones were prominent, but it was really defined like only adults had it. Maybe a random college kids had it too.
Telephones.
No, not to that level. I remember I even see those big guys will carry a case too. Oh my gosh, how did people do those? But anyways, I remember when I got my phone, my first cell phone, it was under Singular. Before it became AT&T. And it was Singular, and it was like a silver cheap, you got it for free phone. And I just remember I thought it was so funny and cool because why? I can make a couple calls when I took my parents threatened me with life not to make a text because how much it costed to text them, like 25 or 50 cents a text them. You only call and it's an emergency, don't do it. So what did I find? I see like a couple games under, they had like Snake and some other stupid game. And then on the front of it was so cheap, it was a little flip phone, very cheap. It had like a mirror. So I make faces at myself and stuff. That's it. That was my phone. And then you started seeing, going back to what we said, the gluttony, the enhancements. Oh, look at this one.
Yeah.
It's a bigger flip.
Yeah.
Or this, I remember the one I had in college, I thought was really cool. It doesn't even exist anymore. It was called HTC, the company, but it was called the HTC Tilt. So what it was is back then, there used to be who created, Motorola? No, Sidekick. Remember the Sidekick? You like do the flip, the like slide. It was real cool. I was like, oh, that's the cool. You could call like this, but then you slide and you get the whole keypad. The Tilt that I had did the exact same thing, but it tilted. So you felt like you're on a real computer or whatever. Like, oh, okay. And me, the smart aleck that I was in college, yeah, you see, but I was old school.
I can't use it. And I put 2 clicks in there.
It was so funny. I remember like the old school, like in college, just to finish up, like I'd have it here. And then this was this in the period that they didn't tell us to put the phones away. I don't think they were caught up to my professors to say like, what I have on their side, I have like full equations, okay, I'm writing down, setting up. They're like, sir, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, nothing, I'm just turning it off. Full equations, like physics. Well, you can do whatever you want. People, I had one kid, he had like a full like novel. So any question, I was actually laughing during the test. I saw him do it, and he's literally like, okay, like writing down, like word, you got everything down. He just walks up, smiles. I beat the system, whatever. I'm like, you'll get it this time. But it's funny like how things will work. Now the problem though is now everyone has a cell phone. Heck, my 7-year-old Luke, oh my God, he asked us, and he did. But as we don't know, she's still on. Luke is 7, gonna be 8 in a few weeks. He asked Santa for a phone, iPhone 14. I said, I promise you one thing, Santa ain't bringing you that. So you better think about what you want, or you're not getting anything.
Right.
Yeah, mine's an iPhone 11. You want a 14? I'm like, get out of here. So, yeah, it was really silly, but
Our kids don't have cell phones.
no, I respectfully, I was given at 16. I think by the time you're driving, okay, maybe now, I would think maybe by high school. I think high school, but the problem is with junior high, it depends, because for instance, like we're over here in Hunting Ridge, my son would go to Plum Grove. Plum Grove, the Hunting Ridge got a little hike. I might, even in junior high, think about giving him a phone. The worst thing, because then here's the problem though, it goes back to what our friend Nico said, just to talk about society, is that there's also peer pressure. If you don't have a phone, you don't have this, that, they will disconnect you. And the problem now, modern day, is if you're not with us, you're either against us or we don't want you, right? And it's bad, because then because that's the whole premise. You don't talk, you don't recognize. And what are you gonna say? Oh, message me on this. I mean, that's why you see the kids now, they all want the same games. And the video games now, they communicate with each other. Like Fortnite, and my son plays Among Us and some other stuff and all these things, and they're communicating with each other. They'll send a message to their friend or whatever, but then that's very scary, because why? There's other people in these lobbies. They could send messages to the kids. Hold up, you hear all those phishing scams or whatever. Yeah, I'm like, oh my goodness. So it's gotta be very mindful, but this is reality. This is society, humanity, 2023. We're done. 22 is the news. 2023. It's a very interesting world. Not pointing out that everything's negative. So how do you not turn it back into the positive? That's where we get. That's why I started at one point as well. So it goes for us and for your single person. Start with yourselves. Start with your spouses. Start with your families and your children, so they can understand. Okay, and it's okay. It's okay to remove yourself from having these indulgences or whatever, and taking ourselves out to see the reality of life and the beauty that comes with our study of our faith and applying it and living it on a day-to-day basis. So, after that, what a beautiful
What's the
night.
name of the second one? How old is-
Theo, Theodoros.
Oh,
Five.
Theodoros.
Yeah, 5.
I talked to him yesterday.
Thank you, everyone, for coming on. God bless you guys. Have a beautiful evening. Kalinita, Kales Yordes, happy holidays, and before you know it, Christmas will be around, and we'll be wishing each other a Merry Christmas. God bless you. Take care, everyone. Bye.